After World War II, Italy was the only major Axis power that avoided occupation. Unlike Germany, which was divided into occupation zones, or Japan, which underwent massive constitutional changes, Italy was largely spared from the same fate. It wasn't split up, nor was it subjected to the harsh treatment faced by its former allies. Instead, Italy lost its overseas territories, was disarmed, and was forced to pay reparations, but by the end of the 1940s, Italy was largely rehabilitated and back on its feet. So, why wasn't Italy occupied like the rest of the Axis powers after 1945? To understand why Italy didn't face full occupation, we need to look at its unique position during and after the war. Italy was the first of the major Axis powers to admit defeat. In 1943, King Victor Emmanuel III ordered the Italian government to side with the Allies and fight against the German forces that remained in the north. This decision effectively marked Italy's exit from the Axis powers, though the country was still divided, with the Germans propping up Mussolini's Italian Social Republic in the north. From the Allied perspective, Italy's situation was far less critical than that of Germany or Japan. The Allies' primary concern was to defeat the Germans who were occupying the north of Italy and to dismantle the Italian Social Republic. The US and UK were focused on liberating Italy rather than imposing a long-term occupation. Their goal was not to manage Italy's day-to-day affairs, but to remove the Axis presence and secure the country's cooperation. By the time the Allies took control of most of Italy, the country was no longer a direct military threat. Another reason Italy wasn't occupied like Germany or Japan is that the country was still needed for its industrial capacity. Unlike Germany, which faced deindustrialization after the war, Italy wasn't seen as a major source of threat through its manufacturing. In fact, the Allies found it easier to use Italian factories for war production, which allowed Italy to avoid the heavy industrial dismantling that Germany suffered. Additionally, many of the people who had supported Mussolini's fascist government were either pardoned or integrated into the post-war government, which helped maintain stability. Another key factor in Italy's post-war treatment was the absence of Soviet occupation. Unlike Germany, which was divided into Soviet-controlled East Germany and Allied-controlled West Germany, Italy did not have Soviet troops on its soil. While Yugoslav communist partisans had a presence in the northern regions of Italy, the Soviets had no significant interest in occupying the country. This meant that only the Western Allies, the US, the UK, and later France, were involved in Italy's post-war settlement. After the war, most of the political figures in Italy who had opposed Mussolini's fascism were staunchly anti-communist. This was a critical factor, especially as the Cold War was beginning to take shape. The United States was deeply concerned about the spread of communism in Europe and wanted to ensure that Italy didn't fall under Soviet influence. Keeping Italy stable and aligned with the West was more important than punishing the country for its wartime actions. So, Italy's rehabilitation was seen as essential for the balance of power in Europe during the early years of the Cold War. Furthermore, the United States had significant political considerations. There was a large Italian-American voting bloc in the US, many of whom were Catholic. With the upcoming 1944 elections, President Franklin D. Roosevelt was keen to maintain favorable relations with Italy and ensure their support. This political reality meant that the US was much more interested in a quick recovery for Italy rather than subjecting it to prolonged occupation or punishment. While Britain and France were keen to take a harsher stance, refusing to support the Italian monarchy and pushing for tougher military restrictions, it was the United States that held the most sway. The US overruled many of their demands, and Italy was allowed to rebuild relatively quickly. In exchange for the US's leniency, Italy lost its overseas empire, had its military severely limited, and was barred from producing nuclear weapons. By 1949, Italy had joined NATO, solidifying its place in the Western Bloc and gaining permission to rearm in the face of the growing Soviet threat. This was a critical turning point. Italy's strategic position on the front lines of Europe meant that it had to be kept strong as part of the Western defense strategy, rather than being kept weak or divided like Germany or Japan. So, why wasn't Italy occupied after World War II? It all came down to timing, geography, and the shifting dynamics of the Cold War. While Italy faced restrictions and the loss of its empire, it was not subjected to the same fate as Germany and Japan. In the end, Italy's role as a key Cold War ally made its rehabilitation a priority for the Allies.